Good evening and welcome. My name is Andrea Lissoni. I'm senior curator here at TATE Modern, and together with Carly Whitefield, among other things, we are overseeing and conceiving the cinema program. We, perhaps as you know, once a month or sometimes twice a month, we screen films, but they are structured in a particular way. We announce the film program normally in February, and we consider it a sort of exhibition. And this exhibition is always divided in three strands. One is the artist film premiere, the second one is called the pioneers, and the third one is called counter history. So tonight, we will be beginning this series of screening, framed as counter histories, a device we invented, a title we invented to challenge regional or historical, let's say, moments in the history of cinema and art. And the title, as you can see, as you will see, is actually Tropicália and Beyond. It's an enormous pleasure for us, and it's also a great achievement to welcome tonight all of you, and also in particular to begin this series of screenings that we started talking about them actually 3 years ago, even more perhaps. And it was a proposal related to a research made in collaboration with the University of Reading that had the aim, as most of you know, had the aim of trying to find out whether Tropicália had left a legacy behind, but beyond the legacy, what is beyond the legacy, and how the younger artists are today challenging or responding to Tropicália. So starting from this question, Stefan Salmon very nicely pulled together this very ambitious program that is the result of his researches mostly, and some conversation we had throughout time. It's actually in the last 3 years, and the conversation became very, very dense in the last 6 months. I won't say anything else apart from the fact that we have to be incredibly grateful to Stefan, who I reckon was so supportive, so present, so committed, and I'm sure he is overwhelmed, but also very proud. We rarely had such a good experience with an external curator, incredibly committed, and we also have to say we rarely had such a good collaboration among our own team. And I always have to mention Carly Whitefield, of course, but also Maria Guibert, who was substantial in this series. I think I said everything, so now it's the time for me to ask you to joining me in welcoming Stefan Salmon, who will be framing the next 3 days of screenings and saying something far more pertinent than what I quickly said about the program that we hope we will be following the next day. It's a very unique opportunity. Just one little note that I was about to forget, but it's very important. Interestingly enough, now we are we are celebrating the 50 years from the first presentation of Tropicália, the work that Helio Itisica did. So please take your time and walk upstairs in the galleries in the Blavatnik building. On the level 3, there is a display of works from the collection called Between Performance and Participant. And the second work you encounter is Tropicália. As you know, Tropicália was made in 1967. It's possible to walk through. And the work was displayed at the Whitechapel Gallery in 1969. So the series are also coinciding with this very important anniversary for the history of Brazilian art, but also for the history of TATE Modern. So now, finally, join me in welcoming Stefan Salmon. Thank you.
Eu vou tentar falar pouco em português. Boa noite a todos e todas. Bem-vindos a TATE Modern, bem-vindos a Londres. É um imenso prazer ter todos vocês aqui hoje. Eu poderia continuar falando português, mas demorará muito. Então, eu vou mudar para o inglês. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this first session in the film series Tropicália and Beyond, Dialogues in Brazilian Film History. It's my great pleasure that you've joined us all here this evening, and I hope to see many of you in the screenings that take place over the next few days. As Andrea mentioned, Tropicália and Beyond has emerged from the research project towards an intermedial history of Brazilian cinema, exploring intermediality as a historiographic method, which is funded by the Arts Humanities Research Council in the UK and the São Paulo Research Foundation in Brazil. Over the last 2 years, myself and my colleagues from both the University of Reading and the Universidade Federal de São Carlos in Brazil have been working together and considering different periods in Brazilian film history in relation to the other arts. So we've been looking, for example, at the theatrical prologues that were staged before film screenings in Cinelândia in Rio de Janeiro in the 1920s. We've been looking at the musicians associated with the chanchadas in Brazil from the 1930s through the 1950s, and also at the culture of mangue beat in Recife in the 1990s. As part of our project, we have many other events. There will be a 10-week course of Brazilian music films taking place in Reading from January to March next year. Later in the year, we'll also be restaging some of those theatrical prologues that I mentioned, working with a theatre company in São Paulo and with theatre students here as well in Reading. We'll be staging those both in the UK and in Brazil. And currently, also, which is very exciting in post-production, is a feature-length documentary called Passages about the history of the filmmakers who worked in Recife and in São Paulo from the 1990s onwards. Including in-depth interviews with many filmmakers, including Kleber Mendonça Filho. It's very exciting. This series of Tropicália, however, as you will read in the program eventually, also comes out of the idea that cinema borrows from other art forms, just as it encourages work as well in other creative spaces outside of the cinema. So as I've mentioned in the program and as you see on the website, Tropicália is perhaps more commonly associated with the visual arts and with music, but it also has a lot to say and touches a lot on film history too. In fact, and according to Caetano Veloso, it wouldn't have been possible, Tropicália as a cultural movement, without the feature presentation that we're about to see tonight, Glauber Rocha's Terra and Transe from 1967. I won't say too much about that film because we'll have plenty of time to discuss it later, but I'll say a little bit more perhaps about the series. In keeping with that idea of cinema's relationship with the other arts, you'll also hear music before each of the sessions, which is closely related to the films that we'll be screening. Tonight we started with Caetano and Gilberto Gil, but we'll be moving elsewhere from Tropicália and beyond to other spaces and other kinds of genres of music. And as Andrea said, this series is also connected with the installation work, Tropicália by Elio Itesica, and I really strongly encourage you to explore that work since it's just reopened to the public for this screening and will be open every weekend after that in this gallery. This series has travelled a very long way since it was first conceived over 3 years ago, and while it has always revolved around the Tropicália movement, and begins indeed with a film from the year that Tropicalismo as a concept was first instated, it has also developed in different directions. And I'd like to say that development has been the result of collaborations and conversations with my fellow colleagues, with other curators and researchers, and with all of the filmmakers involved in this program that have made this exactly what it is. It seemed like a good moment as well, now that we're 50 years on from the beginning of Tropicália, to reconsider what that means perhaps today and how we might reflect on Tropicália as a concept and as a movement and thinking about the artworks that emerged from it. I won't say too much more about the series or about the films we're about to see, but I hope that the program will provide more information about that. I've also edited a catalogue which you can purchase in the TATE shop and which is also available if you've decided to purchase a ticket to all 7 of the sessions, which is also encouraged. But this is available in the TATE shop and covers all of the program, all of the films in the series, and we have contributions from many of the filmmakers and scholars who are associated with this work. There have been many different people whose assistance I have drawn upon for this project, especially as I'm an outsider of Brazilian cinema. And I won't try to mention all of their names since I know that I'll forget some people and I don't want to embarrass anybody. But you'll find all of the people I need to acknowledge in the printed program. But I would like to thank all of my colleagues from the University of Reading, Professor Luciana Gib, Alison Butler, Professor John Gibbs, Lisa Peirce, Albert L. Duque, and Richard Mackay, and my colleagues from the Universidade Federal de São Carlos, Luciana Correa de Araujo, Susana Rec Miranda, Samuel Paiva, and Flavia Cesarino Costa for their encouragement and support in making this program work over the last couple of years. And of course, this would not have been possible at all without the strong support and assistance from the staff here at Tate Modern and in Tate Film, to the absolutely indefatigable, dynamic staff they have here, Carly Whitefield, Maria Gibert, and Andrea Lusoni. So thank you to all of you for allowing this to take place. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce the directors of the first film that we'll be screening in this series, a short film that will precede Terra, Transe, and which is in fact an installation work that we're lucky to screen as a short film tonight. We'll also be showing this film, Barravento Novo, as an installation piece tomorrow in this cinema from 10 to 5 p.m. So if you enjoy watching this film or would like to recommend it to others, then it will be on display for free and the cinema will be open all day tomorrow. So I recommend taking that chance to see it again. But I'd like to introduce now Eder Santos and Bruce Yonemoto. Eder Santos is a multimedia artist from Brazil who I met at an exhibition actually in his home of Belo Horizonte last November. And he works in all different media, especially video art. And Bruce Yonemoto is an artist from the United States, and I met him here right in this cinema at a retrospective of work that he had been completing with his late brother Norman from the mid-1970s, series of video art pieces. And so it was a pleasure to be able to make contact with both of these directors and to know more about their work. So I'll hand it over now to Bruce and Eder, and we'll have plenty of time following both of the screenings to continue discussing both Barravento Novo and Terra, Transe. Thank you.
I guess we have these other mics, so we don't need this one. But I want to thank everyone at the Tate Modern, particularly Stefan, of course, Stefan Solomon, Andrea Lissoni, and Carly Whitefield for presenting our work. And of course, they are present here, Camila and Antonio Pitanga, who, of course, star in our work. Augusto the Ghost Barros, and of course, my friend for over 25 years, Eder Santos, the great artist and director from Brazil. I first learned of Glauber, Rocha, in the mid-90s when I had a residency in Brazil. I lived there for a year. And I found his work to be just so dynamic, inspirational. And it still has resonance today. And so when we met Camila and at Eder's restaurant in Belo Horizonte, we thought of this idea of doing some work together. And I thought maybe we could do something based on a work by Glauber. And so we came up with this idea together, and I'm very excited about it. And so anyway, here's Eder.
First, I'd like to thank all the people that were saying, and especially Camila, because she is the one responsible for this thing. And as a premiere, Okay, I need to do it again. Yeah. Okay, so I want to thank you all the people that Bruce said before, and especially Camila, because she's responsible for, we have this thing here. She invited us to film. We film here like in a vacation style, like we went to the beach to film. And I'd like to invite her and Antonio and Augusto to come here as a premiere of the film. I would like to show the people here. Bruce, come on. And just say that we tried to rereading Barravento in a very short way, but we know that we need to keep saying about slavery and black people race against. We're talking about the colonizers that really keep doing the same thing to today, and there is a gesture in the film that I'd like to people make it, but suppose it's going to be a surprise in the film, but we need to say, aqui, ó. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for being here. We now have quite a bit of time remaining in which we can discuss the film. I should have mentioned before we began that we're very, very fortunate to have seen not only the world premiere tonight of Barravento Novo, that was generously shared with Eder and Bruce for us, but also to have seen the 35mm print of Terra and Transe from the Cinemateca Brasileira, and we're very grateful to the staff who worked there for making that possible for us. We're also, of course, fortunate to be joined by many guests this weekend, who I'll now introduce. So we have with us to discuss Terra and Transe three of the doyens of scholarship of Brazilian cinema. First, Professor Robert Stam from NYU. Professor Lucien Najib, my boss, from the University of Reading.
Shall we go?
Yes, come. Venga. And shortly, I'll introduce Ismail soon. We also have with us tonight, of course, Camila Pitanga. Camila. Professor Ismail Xavier from the University of São Paulo. Ismail. And last but not least, of course, Mr. Antonio Pitanga. And Bruce and Eder will rejoin us now as well. So I wanted to begin by asking our scholars here tonight about Terra and Transe. Bob and Lucia and Ismail are key in the history of Brazilian film scholarship, especially in terms of introducing Brazilian cinema to Anglophone audiences, and have written about this film and about Glauber's work, especially in relation to Tropicália. So I just wanted to ask in turn, first Bob and then Ismail and Lucia, what were your impressions first on seeing this film? What's your attachment to this film? And again, how does this film come to us today? What's the effect of watching Terra and Transe 50 years after it was first produced? So Bob.
He's asking the story of my life. Because it starts in Paris. I was in Paris, and many stories about gringos who get involved in Brazil start with a love story, right? I fell in love with a Brazilian woman who was connected to the artistic world. Her sister was an actress who worked with Sônia Braga in Moreninha. Her brother produced São Paulo S.A. So I was very lucky to have her as my guide to, yeah, it fell. Should I just hold it?
No, turn on the inside. Yeah?
So that was my
It's not turned on.
I see.
I think it is a turn on.
Cine Imperfecto.
Bruce.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay. So 1968-69 Paris was the beginning of my love affair with this film. Then the next moment was in 1973. I was studying again in Paris, and there was a course entirely dedicated to this film with Marie-Claire Hopard, where we analyzed this film shot by shot. So I analyzed these two sequences where Vieira meets O Povo, and in both cases he represses O Povo, right? So kind of this demystification of populism. So the next time I went back to Berkeley, and I had very good luck because who fell into my life? Glauber Rocha. He became my roommate. He lived with us. And I translated for Glauber, and they asked me to translate. And I don't know if you know what it's like to translate for Glauber, but he's a Barravento, right? People use the word volcanic. So he doesn't wait for the translation. It's not like one sentence and you translate. No, he speaks for 6-7 minutes, a mix of languages. There's a little French because he was exiled in many countries, so you hear a little Italian, some English, brilliant metaphors, and you somehow have to do some sort of synthesis. So, but I sort of knew his work and knew how he thought, so that worked out very well. And I just wanted to say a few things about him as a roommate and what you learn about him. First, he tolerated no paternalism. So this akio is kind of how he regarded journalists who were patronizing or racist in some subtle way, etc. The other thing is hospitality for him was not wine and liquor, but maconha, marijuana. So my stock was exhausted pretty quickly. But also, he loved reading, so he would look through my books, and it's what they say about Godard, that he would look at the first paragraph, read the last paragraph, and sort of get it. Because he was always an intellectual. He's a child prodigy. He was talking about Schopenhauer and Nietzsche when he was 10. He was staging plays when he was 9. Also, I just want to say that without Terra and Transe, there would be no Tropicália. And it's Caetano who said that. It's a very famous passage from his memoir. He said when he saw the first shot of Terra and Transe, the combination of the candomblé music and the aerial shot, and he called it a traumatic moment. He said without that moment, there would be no Tropicália. So it's intimately connected to the whole phenomenon of Tropicália. It was kind of funny when he was living with us because a lot of friends, it was kind of a semi-commune, so people would stay in our place and they'd wake up and they'd say, "Who are you?" And he'd say, "Glauber Rocha." Right? And many of them were Brazilians, then they would know, but they'd be a little surprised. And just the fact that he would stay on our couch for so long, he was the least snobbish person you can imagine. You know, he's world famous, he could have had a hotel, he could have stayed in a better place. So it was really a thrilling experience. And just one more comment. I think when I wrote the article, which is in your collection, he read what I wrote. So imagine the luck of having the filmmaker comment on what you wrote. So he talks about the prototypes and that Paulo was a mix of himself and then 4 journalists from JB. He talked about Vieira, the prototypes were Vargas, the renunciation speech, was Miguel Arraes, and that conversation where he says, "You're our leader, eu sou grande líder." He said, I had that conversation with Miguel Arraes in Algeria. So something that's surprising in this film for many people is how intimate with power, and he came from the backbench. You know, it wasn't a person from the elite, and yet he had the courage to sort of address the elite and so forth.
Fantastic. Thank you, Bob. I know you have much more to say, but yes, perhaps I can ask Ismail Ismail, if you
Okay.
can share with us your experience of Terra
My
and Transe.
experience, yeah. No, 1967, I was a student in university. And, this film was a kind of shocking experience, not only in my case, but I think in the general process of our culture. And I was beginning as a film student at that moment. And 67 was an incredible year because, this film was released in May, at the same time in which in the Museum of Modern Art of Rio de Janeiro, Hélio Oiticica had his installation that at that time called Arte Ambiental. Today we would call installation called Tropicália. And the name given to that installation, later was used to characterize the whole period. But what is interesting is that this film was a shocking experience, I say, because it created a very strong polemic. And as a student, I was involved in film clubs and in film programs in the university, very politicized at that moment, just in the late 60s. And I was getting in touch with film critics, and I could see how, they were discussing and reacting to this very, dense and it's a masterpiece, and it's kind of a film that the first time we see it, we feel this kind of overloaded by information and different sort of styles, etc. And in September of '67, the Teatro Oficina in São Paulo, the Oficina Theater, presented the play by Oswald de Andrade, the modernist writer, who had in 1928 presented his manifesto, of the anthropophagic manifesto, using the metaphor of anthropophagy to talk about the cultural process. We need to digest the colonialist culture and digest our enemies, in a sense, to take their qualities and produce a new culture. And this metaphor of anthropophagy was something that was reworked many times since then. But it was in '67 that we had this play, and the play was presented in September, and in the program there was a dedication to Glauber Rocha, because José Celso Martinez Correa, who was the director, he told everybody that the film was the great inspiration. Later, the musicians in music festival also brought a new proposal, Caetano, Veloso, Gilberto Gil, related to, at that first moment, a sense of a new sound. They didn't use this idea of Tropicália. It was just some months later, in the beginning of '68, that they came with a record, a vinyl, LP, as we said, called Tropicália. And they arranged a whole bunch of musics, etc., within that spirit of this new trend. I would just like to finish my first comment in my own experience, saying that what is the basic thing that filming presents to create this kind of effect is that, going to a political process, a kind of recapitulation of the political conflicts in the early '60s, that we had an attempt in the João Goulart government to finally, improve the reforms to produce a social change in many fields, and the emblematic reform was the agrarian reform that in Brazil was always postponed. And it's interesting the fact that in the film we see that the basic conflicts are on the countryside in a way. This allegorical country, El Dorado, has a capital, but the whole political conflict is enacted in the countryside. And you have peasants as the exploited people, as the oppressed. Despite the fact that he's trying to make this representation of the entire country. Why he chose the peasants and the question of land? Because it was the emblematic question lived in Brazil throughout our history. And at that time it was a very strong discussion. And then he recapitulates in his way, of course, the process of the conspiration that led to the coup d'etat of 1964. What is interesting is that in this way of representing things, there is a strong presence of the idea of transe coming from Afro-Brazilian religion, and then that's why Bob mentioned that overture in which we have the sound of the candomblé and the camera getting to the land in which everything will take place. And this presence of the Afro-Brazilian religion and music is all along the film. So a lot of scenes are punctuated by this kind of presence. And together with that, we have a theatricality, very strong theatricality, that politics becomes a theatrical performance of two kinds. One kind is the performance that we follow indoors in conspirations of the ones who belong to the circle of power. There is where the decisions are taken. While in Vieira's career, you have this theater, open air theater, especially in that terrace, that is very theatrical in its way. It's a kind of stage. And there we see, all the false promises, at that rally that we see. It's a very long scene. Oh, the people are, with hands with their cartazes, posters, cartazes, empty. There is no words in those. No words, just empty. It's an empty proposal, and he takes a style to represent Vieira as just this kind of, theatrical performance facing the collectivity, let's say, but using the collectivity just as a group to be involved in that kind of resonance.
Ismail,
okay.
I wonder if I could.
Yes, and I would just go on to then we can, or another topic that I think is crucial is to talk about the intellectual, the poet, Paulo Martins, and his engagement. What kind of intellectual is this? Because just to finish, one of the most violent polemics that the film provoked was that 80% of the intellectuals didn't identify with Paulo Martins. They thought Paulo Martins was obnoxious because he didn't fit the kind of organic intellectual, that we see, in the words of Antonio Gramsci, that is a kind of the one who brings the lesson, the one who brings light, the one who is very rational, and the one who has a kind of behavior related to politics. No, Paulo is completely authoritarian, erratic in his moves. He is absolutely, in some ways, obnoxious, if we can agree with many people that they were shocked by the type of person who was representing the intellectuals. That was really a great shock. Last thing, there are a lot of kitsch in this film. It's a very grotesque. A lot of situations in which we have very bad taste is, underlined. And this kitsch, seen in this dramatic theatricality here, will be turned into parody in the Tropicália.
And we'll see some of that perhaps tomorrow night as well.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ismail. I wonder, Lucia, maybe I know because I know that you have a Don't apologise, it's okay. I know you have a strong attachment to this film, Lucia, and to Glauber's work, and you teach it now as well to your students.
Yeah.
I wonder if you had anything to say about how this stands up
it's so
today.
wonderful because each time you see the film, you discover new things.
Yes.
It's always so extraordinary. First thing I need to alert you all is that we have a new specialist in Tropicália, and this is Stefan Solomon. Please go after this session and read the fantastic full introduction that he's written to this book. 10,000 words that now summarize everything that has happened and why Tropicália came to be one day. And I think it's going to become compulsory reading to whoever is interested in Brazilian culture and Brazilian cinema. So it's just a fantastic work. The other thing that is so interesting for us to see today, Bob started to say that this film inspired Caetano Veloso to launch what became known as Tropicália. He mentioned the initial scene of the aerial shots over the metallic ocean, but in his book Tropical Truth, the epiphany that happens to Caetano actually takes place in that moment when Paulo Martins covers the mouth of the union leader and says that famous phrase, what is the people, an ignorant, illiterate, can you imagine Jerônimo in power? And he said he had an epiphany at that moment because he saw the end of populism represented in that scene. And it became, Caetano's statement about the end of populism became very controversial, and we know that somebody like Roberto Schwartz has came to the fore to say that this was a way of embarking in the inevitability of capitalism, but it's a discussion that you may follow up by reading those two authors. But one thing that came to my attention today very, very strongly, because we know of all these other arts that commingle in this film, which is hybrid by nature. We have the operatic tone of the film, the register, and Bob has written so beautiful about it, as if everybody spoke in operatic tone all the time. And the theater that Ismail has just mentioned, the poetry, it's a cinema of poetry, and Ismail wrote that fantastic thing about Eisenstein and Pasolini's cinema of poetry being behind this film. And we know how that concept of Zaum, of the word being more than itself, being a thing in itself, and those lumps of memory that we have of him returning to the past and his youth being just lumps of memory, which are lumps of poetry, and poetry having this irrational element that it plays so strongly there. But coming back to the scene, the frontal shot of Paulo Martins looking at the camera and asking the spectator, you there, can you imagine Jerônimo in power, is the photography, those stills that are always there, repeated for the camera, and breaking the fourth wall, very much in the Brechtian sense, but connecting directly those actors who are there with you in the audience. So now you go home and you create a movement like Tropicália, you know, and Caetano embraced that invitation with all his passion. He's a passionate singer, and went back and said, we need to create something completely new, completely different. Or perhaps Glauber Rocha gave a name to what we thought was the revolution in Brazilian art. So that's what I had to say.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lucia. I think it's very important. We've heard from Bob, who lived with Glauber, but to hear now from somebody who actually worked with Glauber. And I won't say everything about his career, but Mr. Pitanga, among his very extensive filmography and his contributions to Brazilian film history and his stance as an outspoken critic during the dictatorship as well. I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that Antônio Pitanga features in both Glauber's first feature film, Barravento, which you saw elements of in Barravento Novo, but also in Glauber's final feature film, A Idade da Terra, which we'll see here on Saturday night. So there's an interesting aspect of your career, Mr. Pitanga, and I wonder if perhaps you could say something about your experience working with Glauber, what he brought to your career and what you brought to his career as well.
Hello?
Saravá, saravá. Eu acho que eu sou uma pessoa de sorte. Nasci na Bahia, no mesmo ano do Glauber. Estaria hoje o Glauber com 78 anos. No primeiro longa-metragem que eu participei, Bahia de Todos os Santos, o Glauber escrevia no Diário de Notícias.
Okay, I think I'm a lucky man because I was born in Bahia. I was born in the same year as Glauber Rocha. Glauber, if he was alive today, he would be 78 years old. And I appeared in his first film, Bahia de Todos os Santos.
De Trigueirinho Neto.
In Trigueirinhos Netos, Bahia de Todos os Santos.
O interessante desse momento é que Glauber tinha feito 2 curta-metragens, A Cruz na Praça e O Pátio. Ele escrevia nesse Diário de Notícias artigo na área da cultura e vai para entrevistar o Trigueirinho Neto.
What was interesting is that Glauber made 2 short films at the time, The Cross in the Square and The Patio, and he goes to interview, because he used to work as a journalist at the time in the newspaper, Trigueirinho Neto.
Nesse momento, eu estou em cena. E ele espera terminar a cena para conversar com o Trigueirinho Neto e diz quem é ele. Esse é o Antônio fazendo o papel de Pitanga.
And he comes in and I'm doing my scene, and he waits until I finish to then go and talk to Trigueirinho, and he asks him, who is he? And he said, that is Antônio, who is doing Pitanga.
E nasce aí uma grande amizade, porque ele faz a pergunta mais clássica e direta. Ele olha nos meus olhos, eu já sou ator, eu acho que eu já sei, mas ele pergunta para mim, você quer ser ator? Eu digo, eu quero. Então você tem que fazer teatro.
Okay, and then a friendship, we start a friendship from that moment, because he looks in my eyes and he asked me very directly, and I thought I was already an actor, but he said, do you want to be an actor? And I said, yes, I do. And then you have to work in the theater, he said.
E eu falo, mas esse ator trabalha à tarde, ensaia à tarde. Eu sou um trabalhador e eu tenho que comer. Aí ele me leva para a casa dele, na casa da mãe dele, Dona Lúcia, me põe na mesa com a Nessi Rocha, o pai, a mãe, a irmã, a namorada Helena Inês, e faz com que eu me integre ali, em 1958, fazendo parte da família Glauber Rocha.
But I say to him, if I'm going to be an actor, I have to work in the afternoons. I have to practice in the afternoons, and I'm a worker. I can't go and do my theatre in the afternoon. So what he does is he takes me and integrates me in his family with his mum, his dad, his girlfriend. I become part of his family. That's in 1958.
Primeiro momento, eles criam uma produtora chamada Iglu Filmes. E o Glauber traz um produtor que nunca tinha visto cinema de maneira nenhuma, que ele era um empresário da área imobiliária para produzir Barravento.
So the first thing he does is he creates a production house called Igloo Production, and he brings somebody who had never done any films at all. In fact, he worked in in properties, and to create his first film, Barravento.
O Barravento é dirigido pelo Luiz Paulino dos Santos. Esse produtor chama Rex Schindler. Esse filme empaca, tem problemas, e o Rex Schindler diz assim: você me trouxe e você tem que dirigir esse filme, porque senão eu vou embora. E nasce o Barravento, agora sim, o Barravento do Glauber. Eu fui escolhido para fazer Firmino, Bispo dos Santos, pelo Luiz Paulino dos Santos, que era um filme já na parte religiosa. O Glauber assume e transforma o Barravento num filme político.
So we have Luis Paulino dos Santos, who brings me to do Firmino in Barravento. But he also brings another person called Hex Schindler to do the film. And unfortunately, the film stops, and Hex Schindler says, well, you're going to have to get on with this to Glauber. Glauber needs to take over this film. So he does take over the film. I was chosen by Luis Paulino dos Santos, and the film, once Glauber takes over, moves from just being a religious film to being a political film as well.
Eu acho que esse é o Glauber. Ele vem, para entender o Glauber, dos que Ismael falou, todos estão falando sobre Terra em Transe. Eu tive a oportunidade de ver muito antes Terra em Transe, porque o Glauber já era de um grupo de artes plásticas, de poesia, o Geograis, quer dizer, já era uma turma revolucionária na Bahia. Antes do Barravento e depois do Barravento, ele cria uma maneira, uma identidade, né, que transforma esse personagem Firmino num ser político, da questão racial, na questão cultural, na questão social e contra a exploração do homem pelo homem que está no Barravento.
Okay, so this is Glauber, and I came to know this Glauber before Land in Anguish, because Glauber was part of a whole group of artists and other people who were doing all these things. But then you have the Glauber before and after Barravento, because in Barravento he creates this personage, this character, Firmino, and Firmino is a political character in racial terms, in cultural terms, in social terms.
É interessante porque o Glauber vem de uma família religiosa, né? Ele era batista, né? E o universo religioso dele, do candomblé, está sempre presente em todos os filmes do Glauber.
It's interesting because Glauber Rocha comes from a religious family. His family was Baptist. But the universe of the candomblé is present in all his films.
Daí a gente começa e eu faço em seguida, depois dele ter feito Deus e o Diabo na Terra do Sol, né, Terra em Transe, nós fazemos o primeiro filme underground. O Brasil já estava uma pancela, né, de confusão política. Ele faz o primeiro underground, que é o Câncer, que era um título chamado Naquela cidade maravilhosa, o Rio de Janeiro amanhece com câncer. Ficou só o câncer.
Okay, and so I started with Glauber Rocha. We did White God and Black Devil, and then Land in Anguish, and then he decided to do the first underground film, and Brazil was already going through that confusion and everything that was going on at the time. And this was a film called Cancer, but the name of the whole film was, in that marvelous city, Rio de Janeiro, it woke up with cancer.
Depois eu acho que é esse momento, porque o Glauber, toda uma leitura do Glauber vem desde o movimento de 22, com Di Cavalcante, Oswald de Andrade, Mário de Andrade, que havia um movimento, né, em que o Glauber estava antenado com esse movimento. Então, tanto que na morte do Di Cavalcante, que eu estou presente, né, ele faz uma das mais lindas homenagem que o mundo, que o povo, a literatura, não entendeu, depois entendeu, que ele fotografa, filma o Di Cavalcanti morto, mas como uma festa, uma alegoria fantástica.
Glauber was very he was always looking towards or backwards really towards the 1922 movement in Brazil of people like Di Cavalcanti, Mário and Oswald de Andrade, and he does a film which I think is very important, and I was there at the time, and people at the time didn't understand, but I think later they came to understand, which is a film that he films Di Cavalcanti dead, and with all the people and all the allegories and everything around it. People then later understood this film.
E para encerrar,
And to finish,
faço o último filme do Glauber, que é A Idade da Terra, cujo personagem ele escreve para mim que era um deus, uma liderança negra que vem do continente africano com toda a sua sapiência, toda a sua sabedoria, né, para, nesse momento, né, para trazer a grande mensagem de um novo mundo, né, onde ele, como Deus, como Jesus, ele ressuscita os pobres, os trabalhadores. Então, é um líder tropicalista, totalmente tropicalista, que é esse líder que eu faço da Idade da Terra.
and finally, I do Glauber's last film, which is
The Age of the Earth.
the age of the earth, and there I am a leader. I'm like a god, a black leader that comes from Africa with all with all that knowledge, with all the wise message to bring a message of the new world. I am like a god, like Jesus, who resurrects all the workers and all the oppressed people. It's a very tropicalist film, really.
Aí está. Tem um momento que Caetano bebe na fonte do Glauber e inaugura o tropicalismo. E esse momento é o filme mais tropicalista do Glauber, A Idade da Terra. E aí ele é Caetano.
There's a moment when Caetano drinks from Glauber and it launches the Tropicália movement. But in this film, it's the most Tropicalian-like or tropicalist film that there is, and that is where Glauber turns into Caetano, moves towards Caetano.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pitanga. And Camila, I wonder if I can ask you now, because you have just made last year, co-directed with Beto Branch, the documentary about your father's life in Korea, Pitanga. This film is going to show at King's College in London on Monday and at the Institute of Light in Hackney on Tuesday. So there'll be a chance for everyone to see that film. But I wonder, for you as somebody who works across television and cinema and theatre, your experience working with images from your father's film and working with Eder and Bruce on Barravento Novo, and your very strong performance in that film.
Bom, boa noite. Pitanga, inicialmente poderia ser dito que foi um filme em homenagem a um homem e a um artista. Mas tudo foi ressignificado em face do momento que nós estamos vivendo, né? Claro, preciso já te passar, não sei lidar com isso.
Good evening. Pitanga was a film that was made in honor of an artist, of a man, but everything was re-signified because of the moment that we're living at the moment.
Porque os tempos, o eterno retorno, existe essa estarrecedora repetição, né, que eu agora fiquei absolutamente assombrada vendo Terra em Transe, e o filme ficou num lugar que eu acho muito curioso de poder, pelo menos para mim, esse sentido é muito grande, porque o filme não se pensa só quando está se fazendo. Acho que depois, quando você assiste, você relabora também o que você pensa sobre o próprio filme. E eu acho que ele tem uma função de apontar um tipo de resistência, um tipo de desejo, de construção nesse caos que a gente está vivendo.
We have this resignification of this eternal return to the same things and looking at land in anguish at the moment. And although I have seen it before, we have this. Every time you see a film, you re-elaborate, you rethink how it is, and you restructure these ideas in view of everything that has been going on at the moment. At least this feeling is very big for me.
E quando eu fiz Barravento Novo, já estávamos no caos, mas não foi pré-pensado como seria o trabalho, no sentido da cena, da interpretação. A gente conversou sobre um desejo mútuo de estarmos juntos, de conversarmos, de dialogar com o Barravento. Na verdade, eu tinha o desejo de ser Firmino. Eu tinha o desejo de ser esse cara, de ser Pitanga.
Okay, so when we did Barravento, we were already in this chaos that we see at the moment, but we hadn't preconceived it at all. We had just this feeling of being together, this idea of dialoguing with Barravento, and in reality, this idea, I had this feeling that I wanted to be Firmino, to be Pitanga.
Porque originalmente eles queriam que eu fosse Cota. E eu falei, eu também acho interessante a força que Cota tem em Barravento, mas eu achava que, para a luz dos nossos tempos, Firmino tinha uma importância muito grande e uma importância também muito interessante. Uma mulher performar uma voz masculina, coisa que no Cinema Novo, eu não sei se as mulheres têm essa voz. E eu queria que, ao reverenciar, ao tentar reaproximar à luz dos nossos tempos, que a mulher tivesse também um outro tipo de voz.
And I did think it was an interesting idea to be Cota, but thinking about the times that we were living in, I thought it was far more important to have the voice, the intensity of that speech, of the way that the Pitanga taught, Firmino taught at the time. And I don't know how the Cinema Novo talked about women. I don't know if women in Cinema Novo did have that same strength that we needed for these days.
Mas nós trabalhamos num terreno muito mais da performance do que exatamente de um texto, de um texto que dissesse coisas. Mas a minha surpresa foi quando a gente viu o copião, quando vimos juntos, e eu fiquei repetindo, né, repetindo as frases. Eu achei que era interessante, comentei isso com os diretores, que eu achava que era interessante deixar essa repetição, que essa repetição, para mim, ela significava muita coisa hoje, porque eu acho que hoje, nós, brasileiros, estamos tentando, erraticamente tentando. Eu achava que essa tentativa de uma atriz em falar uma fala, em tentar reproduzir uma cena de um pai, de um artista, de um homem, era interessante, tinha um sentido muito forte hoje.
So when we did the film, it was much more about a performance than about text and about things to say. But when we saw the draft of the film, and I saw all these attempts at doing that talk, I thought it would be a really good idea to have that in the film, because I thought that needed to be said. This attempt that we were attempting to say something, to move something, especially in these times. This idea of trying to be an actor, trying to be a father, this attempt at doing this.
Então, eu encerro minha fala nessa reflexão, sei lá, nessa perplexidade, na verdade, dessa errância que nós estamos vivendo no nosso país. Errância. Eu invento.
I would like to finish my talk basically leaving this reflection, this idea, this perplexity of these times that we are living through, this perhaps error, this moment full of errors, this wrong way that we're moving towards. So I'll leave this to you.
Thank you.
I'm wondering.
I wonder, Bruce and Eder, if you wanted to say anything. Thank you, Camila, for talking about the film. Bruce and Eder, if you wanted to say anything about the process of making the film.
Well, it started because Camila went to Eder's restaurant in BH, and she saw his video installations there. And so she really was impressed by them, and so she wanted to meet the artist. So she cold called Eder's house, and of course all the people, the young guys that worked there, got all excited and said, "Is this real? You know, is she really calling?" And and I was visiting Eder at that time. It was very strange, and because Camila was traveling through with this experimental theater group, and that's centered in São Paulo. And so I said to Eder, we had dinner with Camila, and so I said, well, you have to do a project with her because she's interested in your work. And he says, oh, I can't think of anything. And so I said, well, I'll think of something. And so, of course, I remembered, and then I, of course, found that Antonio was her father and that he was the star of Glauber's films. And so I thought, this is fantastic. And so I went back and watched the films, and particularly Barravento. And I was really struck by the idea that he could be giving these speeches today and they would have the same meaning. And so I thought, since he's still around, that it would be fantastic to have him say the same speech then and now. But then when we started to talk more with Camila, she wanted to play Firmino. And that, of course, made everything more interesting to me too, because it's so complicated, I mean, sort of Freudian or whatever. And so to have the father and daughter, you know, playing the same characters, I think was a very fascinating sort of trope that was hard to resist. And so we proceeded from there. And so, do you want to go on, say anything?
No, I'll just say it's fantastic to see this movie together with our small, short movie, and see that really 2 years ago when we started the project, we still doesn't have this government that we have now, and that became perfect to do this thing and watch this movie together with this. And it's really big honor to have Pitanga at the end of the film too. Everything because of Camila.
No, it's also, we wanted to honor Antonio, of course, you know, through this work, and because he is, I feel, the first black actor to cross over in Brazilian cinema, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing. And also, I want to make a plug, because if you're in Rio on December 14th, that's when we're premiering the film as a completed installation. So if you're there, please come, because it'll be very exciting. At the Palace Imperial in Rio. Yeah.
And also don't forget that Barravento Nova will be screening for free in this cinema tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. All day as a looped display. But do go in and see it in Rio if you can as well. Maybe we have time just for one question because we've run over, but I think Noelton can't hold it in, so.
He's going to say, fora Temer.
Vou falar em português mesmo,
Tudo bem.
porque nós estamos na fase do tupi or not tupi. É a frase do Rei da Vela que nós vamos passar aqui no sábado. No domingo. O meu amigo Mourão, que também vai passar os filmes dele aqui, teve uma grande ideia e eu quero compartilhá-la com esse público maravilhoso, tão interessado. Eu estou entusiasmado, muito interessado nessa participação de vocês. Nós vamos fazer um happening, ou melhor, um marketing, na frente do museu aqui, cada um acendendo uma vela. Nós vamos incendiar o Tate Modern no domingo, bem lá na frente. E eu sou muito feliz com essa maravilha de explanações aqui. Pitanga deu uma aula incompleta, a Camila, realmente há muito tempo que a gente não se via. Então, eu acho que isso aqui foi, para mim, uma bela vinda a Londres. London, e eu vou deixar só um verso final aqui. Domingo, que horas?
What time on Sunday?
O filme, nós vamos começar a fazer o happening de tarde. Vamos botar muitas velas lá fora. Mas o filme O Rei da Vela passa às 6 horas. O dele vai passar às 2. Para encerrar, de repente me lembro do verde. A cor verde é a mais vermelha que existe. O verde que vestes, o vermelho que vestistes no dia em que eu te vi, no dia em que tu me vistes. Está no Rei da Vela, está no Paulo Leminski, está no Caetano Veloso.
Não dá para traduzir.
Vocês sabem que eu peguei a Camila no colo e troquei fraldas dela?
Não foi exatamente uma pergunta.
Actually, I have no clue what was just said, but but I fear that security is going to chase us out in 2 minutes, so we do have to wrap it up. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. A huge round of applause for Stefan, Bob, Eder, Lucia, Bruce, Ismael, Antonio, Julia, and Camila.